Have you ever done something wrong and secretly hoped no one would ever discover it? Have you ever hurt someone quietly, then comforted yourself with the thought, "It's not really a big deal. No one will know"? Many people have had moments like that. But this story is about a man who believed exactly the same thing, that no one was watching. Yet while people may not always see everything, life is always listening, and God is always aware. This is a story that stays in your mind long after you hear it. A story about choices, consequences, and the quiet truth that nothing we do is ever truly hidden. So listen carefully. Once there was a small village surrounded by wide stretches of dry land and an endless open sky. The sun shone fiercely there almost every day. The wind carried heat across the dusty ground, and water was more precious than gold. In the very center of that village stood an old stone well. That well was the heart of the entire community. Every family depended on it. Each morning, women gathered beside it, standing patiently in line with clay pots balanced on their hips. Children played nearby, laughing while they waited their turn. Old men often sat under a small patch of shade, discussing the weather and watching the slow rhythm of village life. The well gave water to everyone equally. No one owned it. It belonged to the whole village. And in that village lived a man named Akash. Akash was not poor. He had a solid house built with strong wood and stone. He owned healthy animals, and his field was large enough to produce good crops. From the outside, it seemed like he had everything he needed. But inside his heart, there was a hunger that never seemed satisfied. Whenever he saw his neighbor's crops growing well, he wanted his to grow even better. If someone bought a new cow, he felt the urge to buy one too. To Akash, life was not simply about living. It was a competition, and he wanted to win. One night when the moon hung high above the quiet village and almost everyone was asleep, Akash walked silently toward the well. The night air was still. He looked carefully in every direction. No one was there. Slowly, he lowered the bucket into the well. Then another, and another. He pulled up bucket after bucket of water and carried them quietly to his own field. "It's only a little," he whispered to himself. "God understands. I have a family to take care of too." That night his field drank far more water than it truly needed, and the water inside the well dropped just a little lower. At first, the change was so small that no one noticed. But as the days passed, the sun grew hotter and harsher. The water level in the well began to fall faster than usual. The morning lines became longer. Some women returned home with only half-filled pots. Children were warned not to waste even a single drop. Soon the village began to worry. "Maybe there will be no rain this year," people said nervously. Akash stood among them, shaking his head with what looked like deep concern. "We must pray more," he said loudly. "We must trust God." But that very night when darkness returned, Akash quietly walked back to the well again. More buckets, more water, more lies. Day by day, something strange began to appear. While many fields in the village started drying under the relentless sun, Akash's field remained lush and green. His crops looked alive, strong and fresh. People began whispering to one another. "How is his field so green?" they asked. "Does he know something we don't?" Akash heard those whispers. But instead of feeling ashamed, he felt proud. In his mind, he believed he was simply smarter than everyone else. He thought he had found a clever secret. Yet he forgot one important truth. You can hide your actions from people, but you cannot hide them from God. One afternoon, an old widow named Lakshmi Devi slowly walked toward Akash's house. She lived alone with her young grandson. Her son had passed away years ago, leaving her with little support. What she was about to say to Akash would begin a moment that changed everything. In the previous part of the story, we saw how Akash secretly took water from the village well night after night, believing that no one would ever discover what he was doing. But soon, someone came to his door, a moment that would quietly reveal the truth about his heart. The woman standing outside his house was Lakshmi Devi, the elderly widow who lived in the village with her young grandson. She survived by sewing clothes for other families. Her hands worked long hours with needle and thread just to earn enough for simple meals and daily needs. That day, however, she looked especially tired. Her face was pale. Her lips were dry from thirst. Even her voice sounded weak. She knocked softly on Akash's door. When Akash opened it, she spoke gently. "My grandson has a fever," she said quietly. "The well dried before my turn today. Do you have a little water?" Behind Akash's house stood several large clay jars filled with the very water he had secretly taken from the well during the night. He looked at her for a moment. For a brief second, something inside his chest stirred. Perhaps it was compassion, or perhaps it was a quiet voice reminding him of what was right. But then another thought entered his mind. His crops, his fields, his advantage, and the moment passed. "I don't have enough," he replied coldly. "I must think about my own family." Lakshmi Devi slowly nodded. She did not argue. She did not beg. Instead, she simply said one sentence, her voice calm and sincere. "May God make things easy for you." Then she turned and walked away. That night, as darkness covered the village, Akash lay awake in his house. The wind brushed softly against his window, making a quiet sound in the still air. For the first time, a feeling of unease crept into his mind, but he quickly pushed the thought away. "She will manage," he told himself. Weeks passed, and eventually the thing everyone feared finally happened. The well dried completely. Not low, not weak, completely empty. One evening, the village elders gathered beneath an old tree near the well. Their faces looked tired, their voices heavy with worry. After a long discussion, they made a difficult decision. "We will dig a new well," one elder said quietly. "We will try one more place. Maybe God will show mercy. Maybe there is still water hidden somewhere beneath this land." He looked around at the worried villagers. "If we find water, we live," he continued. "If we don't, everything ends." The next morning, the entire village came together to begin digging at a new spot far away from the old well. Men, women, and even young boys carried tools, baskets, and shovels. The sun burned their backs as they worked. Their hands blistered from digging through the hard earth. But they kept going. Hope pushed them forward. Akash also came to help. But something about him had changed. He worked slowly. He avoided eye contact. He avoided conversations. More than anything, he avoided facing the quiet guilt inside his own heart. For 7 long days, the villagers dug deeper and deeper into the dry ground. Dust filled the air. Sweat covered their faces. Yet still, no water appeared. Only dry soil. Only silence. Little by little, hope began to fade. Days passed after that. The sky remained empty. No rain. No clouds. No relief. Then one morning, Akash woke up and walked toward his field. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. He stopped walking. His heart sank. The fields that once looked greener than every other field in the village were now dry and lifeless. The leaves had turned brown. The soil beneath his feet looked cracked and sick. As he stepped deeper into the field, he noticed something even worse. Insects had eaten through the roots of the plants. Fungus had spread across the stems. The harvest he had once felt so proud of had turned into a ruined wasteland. Akash fell to his knees in the middle of the dry land. "This can't be happening," he whispered. Panicked, he ran behind his house to the place where he had hidden the stolen water inside large jars and buckets. He quickly opened one of them. The smell hit him first. The water inside had turned dark. Thick green fungus floated across the surface, and small worms moved slowly through the rotten liquid. The water he had stolen had decayed. The very water he had lied for. The water he had denied to a helpless widow. The water he had taken from his entire village. That same water had now destroyed him. In that moment, Akash understood something that no one needed to explain. Karma had simply finished its work. God had not struck him with lightning. God had not sent a storm against him. Instead, life had quietly allowed his own actions to return to him. The water he stole had become poison. In the previous part, we saw how the water Akash secretly stole slowly turned against him. His once green field had become dry and lifeless, and the water he hid had rotted. At that moment, he began to understand a painful truth. The consequences of his own actions had finally returned. The greed he had planted in his heart had now grown into loss. The lie he spoke to protect himself had slowly turned into loneliness. And now, Akash had nothing left. No healthy crops to harvest, no clean water to drink, and perhaps worst of all, no courage to ask anyone for help, because sometimes shame weighs even heavier than hunger, and Akash carried both. Meanwhile, the villagers refused to give up. Even after their first attempt at digging for water had failed, they gathered again and decided to try one more time. This time, they would dig just a little deeper at the new spot. The next morning, under the burning sun, the villagers began their work again. Men dug into the hard soil. Women carried away baskets of earth. Even young boys joined in passing tools and helping however they could. Hours passed. Their hands were sore. Their bodies were tired. But then something changed. One of the men stopped digging and touched the ground beneath him. "Wait," he shouted. "The soil feels different." Everyone leaned closer. The ground beneath their tools had become slightly wet. Hope rushed through the group like a sudden breeze. They began digging faster. And then suddenly, water burst from the earth. Clear. Cold. Abundant. The villagers stepped back in shock. Some covered their mouths in disbelief. Others lifted their hands toward the sky. "Thank you, God," they whispered with trembling voices. Tears filled many of their eyes. The water was not just enough. It was more than enough. It would sustain the village until the rains returned. The village had been saved. A few days later, Akash made the hardest decision of his life. He walked slowly toward the place where the villagers had gathered near the new well. He looked weak, thin, broken, not just in body but in spirit. He stood in front of everyone. For a moment, no one spoke. Then his voice finally broke the silence. "I stole the water," he said quietly, "from the old well. I lied to all of you." He lowered his head. "I thought no one would ever know." Then he added softly, "But I was wrong. God saw everything, and what I did came back to me." The air became completely still. Some villagers felt anger rise in their hearts. They remembered the days when their children had gone thirsty. They remembered the fear when the well had dried. But others noticed something else. They saw a man who had already been punished by his own choices. An older man from the village stepped forward. "Akash," he said calmly, "God has already shown you the result of what you did. You lost your crops. You lost your pride. You lost your peace." The old man looked around at the villagers. "If God allowed you to realize your mistake," he continued gently, "who are we to refuse forgiveness?" Then he said something that made everyone pause. "If we hope that God will forgive our sins, we must also learn to forgive others." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then slowly, one by one, the villagers nodded. Someone stepped forward and handed Akash a cup of clean water. Another person brought him food. No one shouted. No one humiliated him. They chose mercy. At that moment, Akash broke down in tears. He realized something he had never truly understood before. Life is not about taking more from others. It is about giving in the right way. And little by little, his life began to change. Not because he became rich again, but because he became honest. Because he became humble. Because he finally became right within himself. And perhaps that is the deeper truth behind this story. God does not ignore even the smallest action. Every drop of kindness you give returns one day as mercy. And every drop of greed you send into the world eventually returns as loss. Sometimes we believe no one sees what we do. Sometimes we tell ourselves that it's just a small thing. But God is the greatest witness. And life is the most perfect mirror. So be careful about what you send out into the world, because one day it will return to you, not to destroy you, but to teach you. If this story touched your heart, write "Karma is real" in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, stories that remind us about life, about God, and about the choices we make sure to follow the channel. Because sometimes, just one story can change the way we live forever. Thank you for watching.